So welcome everybody. Thank you all for coming to the Tech Guest Speaker Series at Wilson High School. Today we have invited Encode Justice, this awesome youth organization that works to make sure that artificial intelligence is being used in humane ways and is as free of bias as possible. They are involved in lots of different areas with healthcare and criminal justice, politics. Check out their website when you get a chance and see all the amazing things they're doing. Thank you guys so much for coming to talk to us today. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'll turn it over to you guys. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. I'm just going to start screen sharing for you guys. We're really excited that you guys are able to come, so 1 second. I think I have to allow it. Wait, are one of you guys able to screen share? Actually, it's not letting me.
Yeah, I can try to screen share. We're doing the healthcare and medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Okay, here it is.
Awesome.
Sorry, let me present. Is everyone able to see this?
Yeah, looks good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Cool. So, yeah, we'll do introductions and icebreakers in the chat. So just your name, or for teachers, just tell us your name and where everyone is from. And then for students, could you put the first word or image that comes to your mind when you hear the word artificial intelligence?
Yep. So anything that you think of. So if someone says, "Oh, artificial intelligence," what do you think of? And while you guys are doing that, the three of us can introduce ourselves. Hi guys, my name is Bibia. I am a junior at Stevenson High School, which is in Lincolnshire, Illinois. And yeah, I'm really excited to present to you guys today. I'll pass it off to Natasha or Mackenzie, whoever wants to go next.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Natasha. I'm also a junior, but I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. And yeah, we're all super excited to talk to you guys today.
Yeah, and I'm Mackenzie. I'm the Director of Partnerships at Encode Justice. I'm also a junior in high school, and I'm really excited to talk about healthcare and medicine with you guys. So I think, is it Natasha, or are you leading, or are you starting us off, or is it?
Yeah, sure. I can go ahead and start. Anything cool with me.
I'm gonna start the slides now.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so just to get started, there's some super quick reminders. So basically, our goal for the workshop is to be as engaging, interesting, accessible, and easy to understand as possible. So you can be sure to leave questions in the chat as they come up, make any comments, and we've also included a feedback survey at the end. So yeah, we just want this to be as engaging as possible and for you all to participate through the chat.
All right, let's get started. So what is artificial intelligence? I know you guys put a bunch of things in the chat about what you think, but as we continue, let's talk about what it actually is before we get started on the bias and the healthcare portion of it. So when we talk about artificial intelligence, we're usually talking about technology that's used to mimic human judgment. So as we all know, humans think in a very complex way, and it's really difficult for any type of computer or algorithms to actually think the way we do. But we're getting pretty close. And the way that this works is we have a lot of this technology works on patterns. And so they use lots of patterns based off of previous example and data that we feed the computer. And based off of the data that they receive, they're able to make predictions about the future and make decisions like we do, which is sort of what we do in our daily lives, right? We use our previous experiences to predict what we want to do next with our decisions. And so when we talk about like algorithms in general, it's usually like a set of steps executed by the machine to achieve a certain goal. So that's sort of what the computer is doing here too. It's developing these algorithms and using these predictive models to think about what's going to happen, and sort of that's how it mimics our human judgment. And so a lot of AI surrounds us in our everyday lives. So I'm sure a lot of you have Netflix or TikTok, Instagram, a lot of these platforms, and most of them, use AI-based algorithms. So when Netflix gives you a recommendation, or if you watch one cooking video on TikTok and you have like 5 popping up on your For You page, that's all because of AI and the way that the technology is trained to like look at what you're looking at and then base it off of what you do.
So yeah, so how does AI work? So I guess the example that we're using here is with housing. So let's say you want to use AI to develop an algorithm that can look at a few factors and estimate the value of a house. So look at the number of square feet, the number of bathrooms, the great school ratings nearby, and it compile this data in a training data set. So thousands of examples of houses, information, and the housing prices. And it uses complex math to see how much each of those factors influence the final house price. And it puts together a formula. So the algorithm applies the formula to the testing data set to find out like what the actual price is going to be. It's called predictive ability. So another thing the AI does is continuously refines the formula until it weighs each of the factors appropriately. So yeah, that's just showing like what I was talking about before. So the type of AI that was used was an algorithm that Zillow uses called a feature called Zestimate. So it considers way more factors and looks at the images of houses as well.
Okay, so now we'll be transitioning into what is the role of AI in healthcare. So for our first focus area will be AI and diagnostic speed. So one example that we chose was a stroke detection machine learning algorithm. So it increases the efficiency of detecting these strokes. And so for every minute of the reduced time to treatment, that equates to 1.9 million patient brain cells saved. So even if this algorithm can just save 1 minute in detecting a stroke, it has a huge impact on the patient's lives. So it showed significant reduction in patient disability over its use, and on average, patients went from being bedridden and needing 24/7 nursing care to walking out of the hospital without assistance. So we can see just how important diagnostic speed is in medicine generally, especially in strokes, and how AI is augmenting this.
Yeah, and here's another quote that we thought was really interesting by the CEO of Atleas, which is a healthcare company, a healthcare tech company. And so we're just going to go through this quote and sort of analyze every part of it and understand how like these companies are using AI in their technology. So it says, as healthcare costs rise, a driving force behind AI is its cost efficiency in medicine. And so what's basically happening is companies like Atleas they're using machine learning and computer vision to identify like cell types, and they don't really need a lot of tests to actually figure out what's happening and diagnose a lot of these things. So they're able to really reduce costs. And they talk about how clinicians and health plans are able to save thousands of lives, thousands of dollars annually per patient by reducing hospitalizations, detecting adverse events from earlier from frequent. And basically what this whole company is talking about is, while healthcare and AI technology can be pretty like scary to think about how we're able to integrate it, but right now the way that AI is being used, it's really, really helpful in the healthcare industry, as you're able to reduce costs and make it a lot more efficient in the healthcare industry. So it's actually helping a lot of people getting their treatment.
So yeah, now we're just going to watch a video on AI and medical accuracy.
Mackenzie, I don't think we're able to hear it.
On a mammogram.
Oh, now we can.
There are
Now
two
we
main
can.
challenges with diagnosing breast cancer with a mammogram.
Would you guys
The
like
first
to
is a
start
false
first?
negative or missing a cancer. There's the other side of the equation, which is a false positive, which means we think they have cancer when they don't actually have cancer.
Computers learn a lot like humans. They learn by example. And in order to teach a computer how to interpret mammograms, we had to show it many, many examples, those that contain cancer and those that don't. And we supervise it, and we say, these are the cases that are positive, and these are the cases that are negative. And after many, many iterations, showing them, and through trial and error, it will eventually learn to get things right. So we had 6 radiologists look at all these cases and decide whether they thought cancer was present or not. We had the algorithm do the same task, but it did much better.
The most exciting part of this work is that we're able to catch 9% more cancer at screening. Also very exciting is that we're able to reduce the amount of false positives by 5.7%.
This mammogram shows malignancy outlined in yellow that all 6 radiologists missed, but our algorithm caught. However, there were also cases that all 6 radiologists caught, but the algorithm didn't. And so it's clear that they're making hopefully complementary decisions, and we're excited by the synergy of putting them two together.
We definitely want to use this AI tool clinically. The best way to do that is to provide it as a tool to clinicians to use. In many cases with AI, using these tools allows clinicians to have significantly more free time to concentrate on what we all went to medical school for, which is to actually take care of patients.
We're excited about empowering radiologists with these tools and hoping they become ubiquitous, such as spell check now permeates your life. You wouldn't think about writing an email without spell check, and we hope a doctor wouldn't interpret a mammogram without the use of some AI assistance.
Breast cancer.
Okay, so some important factors to consider when we're talking about ethical AI in healthcare and medicine. So number 1 is privacy protection in accordance with HIPAA, which is kind of like a privacy and ethics code that all doctors comply with and use it to inform certain like patient decisions. And then also data analytics and risks with genetic modification, since with these advancements in technology, it's important to kind of regulate their use. Although, you know, the potential of CRISPR is super exciting, there's also a lot of potential risks that could happen if we don't use it responsibly. Of course, empathy towards patients, and also the racism and discrimination that is encoded in AI models. So this brings us into our first discussion question. So how could a mathematical model encode discrimination? And we'll be going into a little bit more of like racism and other forms of discrimination in healthcare perpetuated by AI. So you guys can all go ahead and put your thoughts in the chat.
Yeah, we highly encourage you guys to put whatever you think so we can really understand your thoughts, and that's how we're able to get this interaction. It's sort of difficult to get everyone on the mic, but if you could just enter what you think in the chat, that would be awesome. All right, as you guys are doing that, I think we could move on and we'll get started. All right, so as you guys are putting in your predictions, we're going to actually talk about it. So how does bias enter healthcare and AI? So if we take a look at healthcare in general, what we see is we found this like quote from this article talking about how Black people's nerve endings are less sensitive than white people's, and Black people's skin is thicker than white people's. Black people's blood coagulates more quickly than white people's. And so these are all like false statements, but a lot of these medical students believe them to be true. And what happens is in healthcare, there are a lot of inaccuracies in the way that we study it, in the way that the textbooks portray different like races, and the way that they're able to actually study. And so we as humans, we're the ones that are actually coding these machines, and we're the ones that are training it how to, you know, we're feeding it all this patient data. But as we can see, there's already bias in the way that healthcare people like treat and work with people of different races. And so if there's already an existing bias in the way that healthcare patients work, then obviously when you create this technology, then there's an inherent bias that exists within the way that the technology functions and predicts and create these models.
So yeah, I was saying here that a bunch of AI ethical researchers use this trash in, trash out. So if there's bias and I guess inequality, I guess in the mindset of the creator of the program, that's what's going to result from it. So because algorithms are trained to make decisions by analyzing countless instances of real-world data, they extract patterns and statistical correlations between inputs and outputs that reflect the patterns and statistical correlations between the results. So when algorithms are trained on historical data sets, they adopt the biases of human medical practitioners. That's going back to the trash in, trash out. So when they adopt the bias of the human medical practitioners, that's what's going to result, and that's why people are disproportionately affected, especially Black people, like you saw before.
So now we'll be going into a specific case study. So this is on racial bias in healthcare algorithms. So as we can see, it's affecting millions of Black people with these algorithms. So if someone, maybe Vid, if you could put that in the chat, you can have a few minutes to read through the case study. And then if you could just share some of your thoughts, what you found stood out to you, or any kind of takeaways you have from the case study in the chat, that would be amazing.
Yep, I just put it there. You guys should be able to open it and read it. So we'll give you guys about like 5 to 6 minutes. And these case studies, we're going to have a couple of them throughout this presentation. These are really for you to see that we're not just saying this, but they're actually real life examples. And so when you're reading them, like keep in mind, like this is something that's not just a myth or something that's happening in the periphery. It's very much existing in our society. So keep that in mind while you're reading, and yeah, put away your biggest takeaway after reading it.
Mm-hmm.
Once you guys are done, if you guys could maybe put something in the chat, maybe like we're done or something like that. I don't know if you can do reactions on Teams, but maybe like I think you can raise your hand. So if you guys could just give us some sort of indication so that we know you've sort of read it and you have the main idea, that would be awesome. Oh, awesome. You can react to the message on the chat. Awesome. Looks good. All right. So we're going to be talking about the case study. So as you guys are completing it, if you could put like your biggest takeaway. I know we have this slide up here that's talking about the case study itself, but if you wanted to talk about what you found interesting specifically, that would be awesome. Okay. I'm going to start explaining the case study. So, or Natasha, if you wanted to explain it, sorry.
Yeah, for sure. So we wrote a few of our takeaways on this slide. So basically, the algorithm was less likely to refer Black people than white people who were equally sick to programs for patients with complex medical needs. So you can just see, the blatant discrimination of this algorithm. It gave Black patients who were more sick the same risk score as white people. And it's used by hospitals and insurers for over or around 200 million people in the US. So, this algorithm is being implemented and is having a huge impact on our healthcare system and is being used by so many hospitals and insurers today. So this is such a pressing issue. So this algorithm specifically used healthcare spending as an input. So how much the hospital spent on treatment for a particular patient. So they were using the idea that more spending meant that there was more likelihood of being at medical risk, but the healthcare system as it is spends less on Black patients per capita than on white patients, even for the same condition. So clearly this measure of hospital spending is not actually equating to who's at higher medical risk. So essentially the result of this is bias in AI mirroring the bias that is already in our healthcare system as is. And yeah, people had a lot of great takeaways in the chat. So if anyone wants to add on to that.
Yeah, I think we could go on. I think the next slide also sort of just grows on this. But yeah, you guys are saying some pretty great things in the chat. And so sort of building off of what Natasha was talking about with the inherent bias in the way that Black patients are treated right now, we saw that this algorithm found about 26%. Like very high risk people had 26% more chronic conditions than white patients, also rated very high risk. So what's happening is, as Natasha mentioned, we're basically saying, oh, like the algorithm are saying, okay, if you spend more money on a person, they must be more sick. So they're the ones that are making it into these programs. But that's not actually how it works. The reason we spend, one person has more money spent in their healthcare is often very racially biased in the way that the healthcare system has done it. And so because of these large racial disparities, we see such inaccuracies in these algorithms. And so if these disparities were corrected, right, and we actually had the actual sick patients who were actually needing the trial, if they were recommended correctly, we would have seen that the numbers would have tripled for the number of Black patients that were recommended. So as we mentioned before, we can see there's a clear reflection of, if this is how the data is being put in, like Mackenzie was mentioning, the trash in, trash out. Our current data in the healthcare system is already biased. So if we put in this inherently biased data into the computer, we can't expect it to do anything else than be biased. So that's sort of a huge issue right now, and that's sort of what we learned from the case study. Mackenzie, you can go to the next slide.
Cool. So right here is just a video.
All right, in Health Watch, New York insurance regulators have opened an investigation into United Health Group over an algorithm they say is racially biased. Now, the formula was originally made to predict the future healthcare costs of patients, but according to a new study, it ended up leading to lower levels of care for Black patients than white patients. According to the Wall Street Journal, New York State is now investigating whether the algorithm violates a state anti-discrimination law. So Wall Street Journal reporter Melanie Evans has a recent article on this issue and is joining me now. Thanks for joining me. I read the article and I was fascinated because we talk a lot about artificial intelligence here and the various ways it's being used. And so I want to just sort of talk about artificial intelligence, the way it's being used here. We're talking about an insurance company. The business model for insurance is hopefully to take in more money than you dish out. So insurance companies want to be able to accurately predict how much money they might be spending on a patient. So what was happening here?
So this algorithm is used by both insurance companies, as you say, and by hospitals. Mm-hmm. And the goal of the algorithm was to ostensibly identify those patients with the greatest medical need, who are at sort of highest risk of ending up in the emergency room or needing additional care.
Okay.
The issue, as you pointed out, was that it didn't actually it ended up that it didn't actually predict medical need, it predicted cost. And what the researchers found is that cost and need are not the same thing.
Mhm. And so what was the result of that gap there?
Okay, so what they found, and this was a really interesting study, as you said,
Yeah.
like we're also very interested in the ways that algorithms are sort of turning up everywhere in our daily lives, but also in our medical care.
Yeah.
So what the researchers did is they looked at how this algorithm was actually used in a group of patients at a large academic hospital, and they looked at who got selected for this program. So what the program does is it provides, it can provide everything from like nurses who check in by phone, like how are you doing, what's going on with your blood pressure, what's going on with your blood sugar levels, how are you managing your medications, do you need help getting to your appointments. It could also actually send somebody to a patient's home, right? It's this extra support for people who have like a real health issues,
Right.
and who are like understandably struggling to sort of keep themselves as healthy as possible.
Right. And this is the kind of stuff that can keep people from going to the emergency room.
Right, exactly. And so what the algorithm did is that it essentially sort of prioritized patients. And there was a group who were considered the highest need, and they just got fast-tracked into the program. There was a second group that was considered to be like, maybe we should keep an eye on them. And that group, the algorithm flagged and got sent to the doctor for like additional review. And so when the researchers looked at how the algorithm sort of selected patients for that fast track program, what they found was that roughly 18% of that group were Black patients based on cost. They looked at the exact same group of people and they asked, what if we didn't look at cost? We just looked at how many diseases they have. Like
Who needed this?
Who needed it? Like, so do you have diabetes, congestive heart failure? How many of those diseases are you grappling with? And if they built the algorithm using that, the percentage of patients in that like fast track group who were Black increased to 47%.
Okay, so that's a huge chunk of patients based on this original algorithm that were not being fast tracked that could truly benefit from this additional intervention.
Correct.
Why was the algorithm so off then? I mean, because part of what AI does is look at our behavior and then sort of develop a program about and learn from our behavior. So what was this algorithm learning from us?
So that's a great question, and that's based on our initial reporting, what we had was the description of the algorithm as it was used at this hospital. And so I can't say more about like how the algorithm has sort of adapted or iterated since then. I can say that the algorithm is developed by a company called Optum. Optum is a unit of United Health Group, which is a large company that also owns the nation's largest insurance company. And when we contacted them for comment on the story, what they said was, these models are just sort of at their sort of early stages in terms of like realizing their full potential, and that they should constantly be sort of revised and evolved.
And so their thing was, this is a work in progress. Well, did they acknowledge that there was a bias in it? Or?
So what they said was the algorithm did what it was designed to do, which was predict cost. But they said that the algorithm is part of a broader set of tools that are used that include things like medical history, and that the set of tools is designed to be used to select patients.
Okay. So in other words, they're not depending solely on this algorithm. There are other factors that they consider. That's United's response. When we think we've done stories of general biases within healthcare, that sometimes doctors are less likely to believe that Black patients are feeling the same pain that white patients are. And so when I think about the fact that these algorithms and artificial intelligence is learning from our behavior, and our behavior can be biased at times, it makes us wonder if we really should be depending on the computers on their own.
So that is like an excellent point. And that is like the bigger point here, which is that these algorithms, the researchers that I talked to that found this very stark just like bias in the algorithm's choices, they didn't say like throw out the algorithms. What they said was the algorithms are as good as we design them, right? And to your point, there is a long and well-documented history of disparities in medical care for Black patients compared to white patients, right? And so if you draw from that data to sort of design the algorithms going forward, you perpetuate that bias.
Yeah.
And so what they said was, you know, we can actually demonstrate by our algorithm design that you could sort of correct for it, right? Like, so it's not that all algorithms are bad,
Right.
but that we have to be very careful and very intentional about how we design them.
I love it. That's great. Also, always remember to be your own health advocate. Ask questions, push. Melanie Evans, thank you very much. Great article.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so now we can go into another case study, and just keeping in mind what we just heard in that video. So this case study is on a COVID-19 vaccine distribution algorithm from Stanford. So it did not quite go as planned. So this is why the article is titled 3 Lessons from the Debacle here. So some quotes that we took away that you can keep in mind when reading. So there's a difference between your theoretical population, so, you know, the training data and those predictions, and the population you actually run the algorithm on. So this is important to keep in mind. And, you know, this algorithm had, the people behind this algorithm had good intentions, and this was supposed to be a way of more equitably distributing vaccines. But then, you know, that theoretical population that they're thinking about, you know, real life is messy. So the algorithm, when it actually translated it into the real population, it didn't quite go as planned and when they could control the data set. So a question we had from this then was, if bias enters vaccine distribution algorithms, how might that impact vulnerable and at-risk communities? You can put this in the chat once again.
Yep, and I just put the link to the article in the chat. So once again, we'll give you guys about 5 minutes, and once you're done, if you could react like you did last time, that was awesome. And yeah, just let us know when you're close to finishing or done. All right, I think you guys are starting to finish up. We'll give you guys like another 30 seconds to wrap it up. And then Mackenzie, you can take the next slide. All right, wait, Mackenzie, do you want to do the slide?
Sure.
Awesome.
So yeah, in this case study, COVID-19 vaccine In this case study, it has something to do with the COVID-19 vaccine distribution algorithm. So going back to like the Tuskegee syphilis study, which was conducted by the United States Public Health Services and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, Black men who participated were told that they were getting free healthcare. And I think 600 Black sharecroppers were enrolled in this program and were deceived by the PHS, who never informed the subjects of their diagnosis and disguised placebos, ineffective methods, and diagnostic procedures as treatment. So this has something to do with the COVID-19 vaccine distribution because medical racism has caused a permanent distrust in communities of color. Vaccine confidence is already low among Black people. So the question that this leads to is, could this lead to higher COVID-19 mortality rates in at-risk low-income areas? And I guess the answer is that algorithmic bias could drive lower trust levels. But, I think that's also something we can see by like the data and the mortality rate of COVID-19 already as we're in 2021. But love to hear your thoughts about that in the chat.
Okay, so continuing on with COVID-19 as well. So this is racial bias in a detection model this time instead of vaccine distribution. So detection algorithms are prone to bias as well. So these models make really important decisions about how resources are allocated, whether this is, ventilators or ICU beds. As we saw, for example, in Los Angeles, they were running out of ICU beds, so they had to make really difficult decisions on how to distribute those. So these tools are built from biased data reflecting biased healthcare systems and are thus themselves also at high risk of bias, even if explicitly excluding sensitive attributes such as race or gender, wrote a group of researchers who sounded the alarm essentially about bias in these detection models. So even if you take out these more sensitive attributes like race and gender, there is still a lot of bias that makes their way into these algorithms. So people who are creating these and choosing the testing data and then trying to implement them in, hospitals and with insurers, they really need to look at how these biases make their way into the models that they are producing, and then how you can ensure more equitable use. So we'll continue on.
Yep, we just have another video for you guys, and as always, please put in any of your thoughts as you're watching in the chat. Mackenzie, are you able to play it? Okay, awesome.
What is very novel about our study is that this specific data set made it possible for us to apply these mature techniques to this data set and for us to discover these biomarkers for prediction of future onset of Alzheimer's disease in speech.
We bring in an understanding of information technologies, how you gather the signals you need, as opposed to just getting more signals.
We work, side by side with neurologists with psychiatrists, with people actually in the trenches of the battle against mental health diseases, and we incorporate that knowledge into our AI models. Speech is a fundamental aspect of human behavior. Right? It's essential for living in a community, and any mental health issue, any dysfunction, either neurodegenerative or psychiatric, has an expression in speech.
You need to understand people in their natural environment as much as you can. And so that's what we focus on at IBM.
So if there would be an automated system, an app, or some other way of collecting data points on how they feel that way and how are their symptoms that way, and if their doctors could see these, or automatically there will be a system to analyze these data points collected every day, the system can warn the patient saying, hey, your situation is going worse, don't wait 2 months to go see your doctor, go see your doctor this week.
Awesome, yeah. All right, so we're just going to talk about the video a little bit. And so we saw that the video talked a lot about bias in Alzheimer's speech detection models. And so while it sounds really great for this type of technology to even exist, right, it's really cool that we're able to just diagnose someone from the way that they're speaking. What we do see is that while it's really cool, it does present with a huge problem when it comes with people of, immigrant communities. And so when you have, because this was trained with speakers with a Canadian accent who spoke in that regional dialect, when you have like inaccuracies with foreign accents and random like grammatical inconsistencies and pauses with people of different ethnicities and races, you see that you have so much like inconsistencies in the technology. And so it's not just the fact that, as you guys have seen throughout this whole presentation, it's not the fact that this, exists and the bias exists, but when these types of fallacies have occurred in the models, they're having real implications on people's lives. So this is like a healthcare decision, right? You're diagnosing someone with like Alzheimer's. It's a pretty big deal. And so the problem is also not just that the fact that the technology doesn't work, but the fact that it's being used and people are like wrongfully being diagnosed. Like if you don't have actual Alzheimer's and because of the way you're speaking with either an accent or, maybe you have a pause or something in the way that you're speaking, if you're like diagnosed with something so severe, it can be pretty devastating in your life and the type of things that you're doing. So that's sort of a big part of our presentation, just bringing awareness to the fact that this technology exists and it's not ready to be put out into the world and to healthcare systems just yet, but it is. It's being used all over. And so I hope you guys, we have some more to go in the presentation, but as you've read through all of these case studies and watched the videos, I hope you like took away the fact that, you understand what the basic idea of what these algorithms do and how they're made, but also understanding that while they're really cool and can have really, we talked about how it can increase the speed of diagnosing something, it can also be incredibly biased and have a lot of errors in it. So yeah, awesome. I think we can move on. Mackenzie, I think you can go to the next slide. Oh, okay.
Oh, wait, am I saying this
or? Yeah, I think you can go back to.
Oh, I didn't know what I heard, sorry.
I know.
Oh, so I go back one?
Yeah, I think you skipped a slide.
Oh, sorry about that.
You're good.
Yeah, back just to talk a little bit further about legislative action. So U.S. Senators Cory Booker and Ron Wyden urged the federal government and major insurers to combat racial bias in healthcare and data algorithms. So in healthcare, there is great promise in using algorithms to sort patients and target care to those who need it most. However, those systems are not immune to the problem of bias, they said in a letter. AI shows a lot of promise in healthcare, but we need better design and regulation. So this kind of shows like an important facet of AI overall, which is that AI can be is a tool, so it can be mobilized for good and to help humanity, or in the wrong hands or with the wrong mindset and with the wrong creator, it can be used to hurt humanity. So I think that's something to keep in mind, that AI is not inherently bad. It just depends on what the tool is being used for and who creates the tool. So that's why it's important to push for diversity inclusion and de-biasing yourself when creating these algorithms.
So some more legislative action that we can look at would be data sets have to be representative of the broader population, as we know, so they should be tested for bias and for comparable accuracy across all genders, races, and ethnicities, and other factors before deployment. So you can't train an algorithm to work on just one demographic and then use it on everyone. So if these algorithms were just trained on, predominantly white people, then how do you expect that to work on the whole population? So the chief medical officer of CDRH says, in many instances, artificial intelligence and machine learning devices may be learning a worldview that is narrow and focused, particularly in the available training data if the available training data do not represent a diverse set of patients. So this is just bringing attention to, the importance of including diversity even in just the training data set so that it can actually represent the population that you're hoping to use it on.
Awesome. So we're coming to a close in our presentation, and now we'd actually like to get what you guys have thought about throughout this and what you've gained. And so I know you guys have been putting things in the chat, which is really awesome. Thank you guys for doing that. But now we have a few discussion questions. Feel free to unmute yourself, but we're just going to go through these questions and you guys can answer them there's no particular order that you have to answer them in. But, can and how do we fully eliminate medical and racial biases from, or racial biases from, the medical system and from AI? How can we fully eliminate that? So if you guys want to put it in the chat or unmute, you can just do that. But, that's sort of what we talked about throughout the second half of the presentation, is that these biases exist. So what do you guys think about a way to eliminate that? How do we get rid of it? And then our next question is, how do we hold software developers accountable for bias in their algorithms? And so we can't blame it all on the actual software developer all the time, because they're simply just coding it, and a lot of it is because of the data that they're inputting, but they are responsible for inputting that data. And so while they don't make the data, they're not the ones that are making all this patient information and uploading it. They're the ones that are actually choosing which case studies and which patient files to use. And, just the fact that they're developing these algorithms, knowing that it could be biased and putting it out there in the world, what type of legislation or what do we need to do to hold them accountable? And that's sort of like moving into our third question, is what legislation could be implemented so that we're able to enforce some sort of like policies or laws to keep the government and healthcare systems from using this type of technology, knowing that it's not, working right now. And make sure you guys, if you think of anything while I'm saying these questions, put it in the chat or unmute, or you can cut me off if you want, and I'm not going to care. We just want to hear what you guys think. But yeah, and then I'll just keep running through the questions and then you guys can answer them. Awesome, you guys are putting things in the chat. And so I'm just going to go on. So where do we draw the line between human and machine decision making in medicine? So it can be kind of scary thinking about, okay, well, a robot is going to decide my healthcare decisions. Yeah, it's definitely scary, but we also know that humans tend to make a lot of mistakes, and humans themselves are the ones that created this bias, and they're the ones that, we tend to make a lot of mistakes. Maybe your doctor was tired one day and, they made the wrong decision. So humans are equally as difficult to work with. So how do we know where machines are good, and how do we draw the line between, how much do we trust the machine or the human in medicine, because it's our lives. So it's a pretty important decision there. And then how can we leverage AI to improve healthcare services? we sort of touched upon this in the beginning of our presentation when explaining like where AI was used and making it faster for diagnosing things like that. But there's a lot more. The field is really, really vast and it's just continuing to grow. So if you have any ideas of how we can use AI to improve this, I know we talked about all the biases and the fallacies in it, but what do you guys think about improving it for the healthcare system and growing that? So now's your time to shine and talk about what you think. We really want to hear your thoughts because this is all about your guys's like the whole point of us being here is not just to educate you, but also understand what you're thinking on this. We are the next generation. We're going to be like the ones making these technologies soon and maybe working in the healthcare system with these types of technologies. So to be able to have, certain ideas about what's going on and thinking about these types of things is really important. So if you guys want to input that in the chat and just have a discussion with us about what you think. Oh yeah, and I think someone put it in the chat. Biases can be eliminated from AI by providing the algorithm with diverse perspective and data. Collaboration and consideration is key. That's definitely true, and I completely agree with that. It's the more diverse that we get our healthcare systems and the people actually making these algorithms, it definitely will decrease. And it's not just like it's not going to happen overnight, but as you collaborate more and you have more diversity in all fields, the data will definitely fix itself over a period of time, hopefully. And so hopefully we're able to make more accurate predictions. And yeah, I think that's what the other person said too. We could try eliminating racial biases from AI by training the AI with the perspectives of different races. It won't work if you train the AI with one race and then try it out on everyone. Definitely agree. And I think we saw that with some of the case studies too, especially with the Alzheimer's one, where if you tried it out with one certain dialect, then it's going to be very difficult for anyone else. Yeah, so a lot of it is just like training and making sure that it works properly for all people and not just a certain group. So we got one more. I think humans and machines should be used concurrently for decision making so that there are multiple checks in place. Definitely. And like a new thing that's happening is like robots being used for surgery. And so it's honestly pretty freaky to think like a robot's gonna like cut into you. But I don't think we're ever going to get rid of doctors, or at least not in the really near future. I think it would be difficult for us to ever get rid of doctors completely. So definitely should have humans working concurrently and making checks. And yeah, I think Eric said it may take longer, but if it means equality and limiting bias, then it should be made. Yeah, definitely. I agree. Like this technology is so powerful and it's inevitable that we're going to use it, and it is our future. We're constantly working. We're all like, I know a lot of us even in this room are really interested in STEM and growing that whole field, and so AI and this type of technology is really, really useful there. But yeah, like at the end of the day, you have to think about, okay, well, is it more important to like further the technology or like a patient's life? So taking a pause on maybe pushing it out into everyone's lives is definitely something that needs to be done. I believe someone said, I believe they should design the AI to be more diverse with race to be more equal. Definitely. One plus of AI, it's harder to hide biases in algorithms than in people. I agree. I mean, people are the ones that, that create the bias. So it is definitely like harder in some ways to instill that bias unless you like purposefully put in the bias in the AI. But it's definitely like a huge problem because we know that there's bias, but a lot of the population does not realize, they don't realize that technology can be biased. You often try to think, oh, robots, how can they be biased? How can they think? But we've gotten to the point where the technology has progressed enough to learn from us and to learn from around us. So if we're thinking, all of us have our perspectives and our biases that are instilled in the way that we think. So there's no reason that the technology can't learn from us and create their own thoughts and biases like that. Definitely. Thank you guys so much for these awesome comments. I think we're coming to a close on our presentation time, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll just finish up with how you can get involved with Encode Justice to actually, I guess take the youth approach to changing these things. So you can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Encode Justice. Read our Medium publications at medium.com/encode-justice. You can apply to be a fellow, either in policy, advocacy, or education. Oops, okay. You can sign up to contribute an article to our Medium publication. So please check that out. I'm not sure if we can get these links. Vidya or Natasha, do you guys have the links?
Yeah, I'll try putting them in right now.
Cool. Yeah, if you're interested in that, we'd love to have you guys. We'd like to expand even more. So.
Yeah, definitely. And Natasha and I, we run the education, we're the co-directors of education. So if you apply, you can be running these workshops soon and, creating these types of things. So yeah, here I just put in the fellowship link, and I think Natasha put in the Medium. So yeah, just join. It would be awesome to get more fellows involved in our organization. We love having more people and spreading the word. So awesome. Thank you guys so much. And I will put in the feedback form now too.
Yeah, please give us some feedback, guys, so we can make these as informative as possible. But thank you guys for having us.
Thank you guys so much for coming. Really appreciate your time and very informative and interesting talk. That was great.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. We really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And before you guys go, please fill out the last link, the feedback form. We really want to improve these workshops and make them as interactive, and just tell us what you liked and what you didn't so we can improve that. Awesome. Thank you guys so much.